Well, welcome again to another episode here of Forbidden Science, also known as FSUFO. Today's episode is a little bit atypical. We've done it before, but once again, I have no co host today. And as I like to say in those episodes, I'm hardly alone because today we got a special guest from a special place, too. And let me put it to you this way. I don't know if anybody's ever asked or realized or cares, but when we do these, I sit in my home here. I'm in my study in Eastern Passage, Nova Scotia. And you know, when I look out the window, it looks very much like Shag Harbour. It's a work and fishing village just outside Metro Halifax, Dartmouth. And when I look out, I sometimes like to pretend and think that I'm in Shag Harbour, which is pretty much my favorite place on earth. But today our guest is Laurie Wickens. And if you live in Shag Harbour, if you live here in Nova Scotia, you're very likely familiar with that name. But if you're not, let me tell you this. Laurie has lived his life in the area. He spent some years overseas as a consultant of fishing. He's been around the world. But when he's at home, Shag Harbour would be his home. And I guess we could say he's, a semi-retired fisherman. He sometimes does a little work here and there. But he also has served a long time now as the chair of the Shag Harbour UFO Incident Society. And he's a force to be reckoned with and somebody that has kept this thing alive through tough times and the lean time sort of thing. And our guest today, if we can bring him on, is Laurie Wickens from his kitchen in Shag Harbour, Nova Scotia. Welcome, Laurie.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Chris.
Yeah. Well,
See you again.
Laurie and I have known one another for a long time, since the early 90s here, and been involved in a lot of things here today. And this is going to be a little different. Often when Laurie's on, he has to tell his story, and his story is an important one when it comes to the Shag Harbour incident. People who are familiar with it will remember or are aware that, it's a great UFO sighting, of course, what some would call a UFO crash scenario, or at least a controlled ditch into the waters of Shag Harbour back on October the 4th, 67. There were many witnesses. However, Laurie was one of the first, he was the first, in fact, to call the RCMP and to have his name go on record. And he aided in the initial search effort, going out on the boat with the Coast Guard, etc. That. And we're going to tell that story, but just in brief. And I'm going to try to make people think about things that what it was really like back then in the village when this was unfolding and what life was like. Because, you look at this on TV, things get packaged, it gets presented in the same way. But these were real, breathing, living people like we all are when you have this experience. And I kind of hope that in the few minutes we spend in that, we're going to put it there. We're going to do that. So basically, we're going to look at Shag Harbour way back then in the past, this famous incident. We're going to look at it in the near past, just a few years ago, of a nearby location of another UFO event where Laurie and I were present together, I'm glad to say, at least for part of it. And we're going to go into that and spend a bit of time in that. And the rest of our show is going to be about the future. And the future here is the upcoming special UFO Expo. That's something that is, I believe, going to be the greatest event yet we've had this way to honor this incident and this phenomena and the things here. So, Laurie, I'm going to take you back to October the 4th, 67. I know you've done this part many times, and I'm going to let you talk for a bit. And at some point, I'm probably going to interrupt you because I want to paint a different picture of what this was really like. But why don't you tell us what you were doing and what you saw on October the 4th, 1967, long time ago. Go ahead.
Yeah, it is. Well, it was a Wednesday night, and usually we're home them not that throughout the weekend. Yeah, but a friend of mine had bought a car that day. He never had no license, and he wanted me to drive him around. That's the only reason why we were out. So we happened to be in Bergen that night about 10:30, and I think there was the three girls that we give a ride home had been to the show, and we went to school with them. They asked if we'd give them a ride home, so that's why we happened to be going up to Shag Harbour. When we see lights off to our right, that's in over the land, not in over the water, where everybody takes for granted it was over the water. It wasn't. The object was going from east to west. Yeah, see, you got a view of Google Map picture up there. So, anyhow, the object was going from east to west, and we seen it first on the top of the hill in Shag Harbour, just before you get to where the wharf is. in that area towards where the track is, somewhere off to a right, and it somewhere between. This is only guessing. It wasn't that high. Somewhere between 2 and 5,000 feet in the air, roughly, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 4 lights. And 1 would come on, 2 would come on, 3 would come on. The whole 4 would be on for a second. They all would go out and start the same thing over. And that went along with us as we was going west too, roughly, or west southwest. And that was going no faster we was. It was going along with us. And when we turned by the school to go from southwest to roughly northwest, and if we was going up a hill, the lights started going, and they changed to about a 45-degree angle and was going down towards the water. Just before we made the top of the hill, we lost sight of the lights for about 2 to 3 seconds max. Made the top of the hill, there was a light in the water, which we knew wasn't never there. And we went directly to a phone booth. We knew where that was, which is about 3 more miles up the road. I think it's 4 kilometers to be exact. But we then called the RTMP and reported the plane crash. Well, Corporal didn't believe us at first, wanted to know what we were drinking, all that kind of stuff. He told him nothing. He got the number of the phone booth, and I went in the car to get the car to leave. The phone rang. He called back, wanted to know where we see it. We just told him the Moss plant, which everybody around here knew. So we left and went back there, and as we was getting back close to the area where we could see out of the water, we could see the light. And I can't remember if there was cars in the parking lot when we got there, or we was the first ones to haul in, I believe. The light went drifting down, then the Mountie that was on duty on showed up first, and about 5 minutes later, where Becky and Ron O'Brien showed up. So there were 2 police cars there, and in the end, there was probably about 40 different people come and see the lights. Some was staged, some went. And we watched the light drift down by the Moss plant. That's where we met, depending where the school is, and the light just went out. And now, in the meantime, before the light went out, Normie Smith and some of them had left there and went to get aboard the 2 fishing boats that went out. Bryce Shand and Lawrence Smith went out looking for didn't know what was there. And me and Ron O'Brien went down on Prospect Point Wharf and waiting for the Coast Guard cutter from Shag Harbour to come, the 101. And we got aboard that and went out, but the fishing boat's been there an hour or more before we got there. They was out searching when they heard the Coast Guard start their engines at Shag Harbour. That's how fine the night was.
Mm-hmm.
And we went out and talked to them, and nothing was found that night. We come back in. I can't remember what happened the next day. Then on Friday, me and Ron O'Brien went back out on the Coast Guard to show them where we see it last and where they should dive to look. And they had divers with them. And when we got about half a mile from there, we were telling them where it was. They stopped. And so we stopped them. Well, we're going to search here. And I looked at Ron O'Brien and he finding nothing there because there ain't no else near it. And if you read the reports and the Coast Guard thing, it says how long the diver searched. Well, they didn't find nothing. Well, I don't know if it's accurate or not, but they wasn't there over 10 minutes. They come up and said nothing, and we went back, and that's the last time I talked to anybody about anything. I would never ask no more questions about the whole thing.
Yeah. However, you were, was it a day or 2 later in the bowling alley when one of the RCMP did have something to tell you? Yeah. And what did they tell you?
And it was wrong. Ron O'Brien said, you know what they call what we see? And I said, I got no idea. He said, a UFO. And I more or less said, what is that? I didn't even heard tell of the words of that around there before then.
That's right. And
you got to remember, we hadn't, television hadn't been there very long, very few years. And like I said, nobody had heard tell of the word UFO before that I know of.
That's right. And that's one of the very important key things about this case. Neither you nor any other witness reported a UFO. It was the authorities that started calling it that, right?
They changed it. That was called that on Friday. The official word of that in documents is Friday that they called it a UFO. Yeah. But I didn't know about it until Saturday when Ron O'Brien told me.
Yeah. By that point, of course, it had been determined that there was no late or missing aircraft or no incoming space junk. They checked with NORAD in the airports, of course. And that's what that was based on. Yeah. But yeah, it was them. None of the witnesses ever reported a UFO. One of the very unique things about the case.
Everybody reported the plane crash, and Ron Paul was the RCMP officer on duty who reported that's what he called a plane crash.
Hmm. But
Because it
again, with
was
none,
our job to make it go away with too many witnesses seeing something.
yeah. Well, I mean, there was a lot of speculation in the community and the local newspapers. You can see in the Vanguard where, when they talk to local residents, they're saying, well, look, if the Navy knows something, they probably aren't allowed to say, etc. And, there were many community, rumors floating through the community about this unusual event, particularly when, Canadian Navy divers showed up and, you know, spent some days looking through the weekend there. They claimed nil results when they canceled, but there was a lot of funny business. There was a lot of chatter in the community. I mean, and the biggest thing why this story probably persisted is that it appeared in the Chronicle Herald and it went out in those days before the internet. The next best thing would have been what they call a line story. It went on the wire services and ended up in newspapers around the world, and there was speculation. And even though it calmed down here and the Chronicle Herald certainly tried to distance themselves from it, the story persisted. It grew legs, as they say, Dick, And one of the things I want to point out to anybody that was confused by one of your words there, when you refer to the moss plant, that's to do with Irish moss, which used to
Yes.
be gathered. That's right, and processed there. And in the past, that was something that was often used as a thickening agent, even in things like ice cream. It had a commercial use.
Uh,
Yeah. But they did
Pure
other,
short, mellows, puddings, it goes into everything.
yeah. Yeah, it was a general thing. There are other things used now. The plant still exists there, but it has other purposes now, too, doesn't it?
Yeah, but there's still moss plants there's a big one in Yarmouth that grows moss, and there's one out in the valley. Moss is still bought yet till this day.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, One of the things too, I think that's helpful and that is often missed in these documentaries when you see them on TV, and even our producer Michael McDonald, who's not here today as a co-host or participating in the show in any way today, um, he did the documentary. He did the very first feature, simply called the Shag Harbour Incident. And many others have done it, and they do a good idea. That they've been accurate. They looked at the research that me and other researchers have done and have listened to it and tried to portray it. But it's not the same as putting you there. Now you were there. One of the things that I think people have to think about is how odd this all seemed and how excited people got because they thought there was a plane crash. There could have been loss of life, right? But maybe you could paint the picture. One of the things that I think you have to keep in mind is, like you say, there was no lights on the road in those days, was there?
No,
And
no
and
street lights, no
it
nothing.
was very, yeah, very dark. The moon.
The only building there at the time or house was the moss plant. None of them buildings or houses as there today were there.
That's right. And it was very, very dark. The moon had been up earlier in the night, but it had already set.
It was
When you
clear.
looked
It
at,
wasn't cloudy. It was a clear night, but it wasn't a
yeah,
bright night. The air was
yeah,
clear.
that's right. It was
There
very
was
clear.
4 mile an hour wind to the western. The air was a little on the cool side. I wouldn't say cold, but it was cool.
Now, Ron Pond's observations are interesting too, because the other two men, when you called the detachment, they were in the detachment in Barrington Passage, but Ron
No,
Pond
Ron
was.
O'Brien wasn't on neither. Where Becky was there, Ron O'Brien was home at home.
Oh, I
He
see.
wasn't
Okay,
on
but
duty, he wasn't on duty
so
that night.
where Bicky took the call then?
Yes, because he lived in the detachment.
Yes.
He
Oh, I
lived
didn't
in
know
the
that.
house was part of the building. Ron
No, that
O'Brien lived out, and Ron was not on duty, period. Where Becky called him and got him, probably not at a bed or maybe at a bed. But
but Pond was on Cape Sable Island in his cruiser, wasn't
yes, as
he?
far as I know, he
Yes.
was on the south side, and back then you could see it. You would have seen it perfect from where he was.
That's right. So he was of the three officers. He was the one that saw it in the air and saw the little pale light floating on the water after it had disappeared or
After he got
submerged.
there, yes. But
That's right.
the other two see the light on the water too when they got there.
That's right. But
The
Pond
light
saw
was
it both.
there for
Yeah, but Pond saw it both in the air and on the water, and I
Right,
think
he seen
all
it going down. He see the same thing I did. And that's what he called play grass, but he never had no idea if it went in the water or on the land. That's how far away he was.
that's right. And the
He
other
didn't know
thing I
where it went. He just knew it went down.
Yeah. The other thing you have to consider, there's no cell phones then. I mean, some of the phones are still on the party line down in the
I
village
would
then.
say he probably called in on his police radio. I'm just
Yeah.
guessing that.
But like you say, you drove to a phone booth to alert the
Yeah. So
RCMP
I had to
to
know there was where it was, so that's where you went automatic, I guess.
yeah. So how did you feel when he questioned your sobriety? You were a young
I was,
man then.
I just knew he ain't turned to crack on, but he wanted to know where it was. I think, to my understanding, the next one behind me was Ron Paul, but I just found that out a few years later. I think he was the next one that called in that he's a plane crash.
Hmm. Yeah. It's interesting, and for people that might remember, now there's the old headline story. Could be something concrete in Shag Harbour UFO or CAF. Now, I'll tell you that if that was a color image, those headlines were red and they were 2-inch headlines, right? And that story went around the world as a line story. And the staff reporter on that down here was Ray McLeod. It's attributed to. He was a young cub reporter there that covered it, and he was clever enough to track down squadron leader William Bain, a gentleman that I very much enjoyed interviewing years later face to face in 1994. At the time, he was in charge of the Air Desk, which was the Royal Canadian Air Force's division responsible for the investigation of UFOs. And the more they looked into it, the more he was convinced that this was the real deal. But that wasn't the case down there because you and all the other witnesses told me at the time, what did you think it might have been, Laurie, when you were asked? I know what you said for many, many years. Why don't you
I
tell
don't
our
think it was
audience today?
about it for a plane, but if you think about it now, what did they have for a plane that can fly that slow? That's the only thing that's changed my mind. And it don't could have been a plane. Who knows what they had? But
Well, true enough, yeah. But for many, many years, you adhered to that. You thought it might have been a secret military thing or development. And, there's a lot of arguments pro and con for that. A lot of people made. But like I say, the point being, nobody down there claimed UFO or tried to bring to it. That determination came solely from the
the
authorities,
government.
you know. Yeah, from the government there. However, like you say, years later, you did come to change your mind over time. And I still remember the first day when you announced that you changed your mind. You remember that we were in Halifax at the library?
Yeah.
Remember that you and I were doing a little talk there? And you said, looking back at it and all that you learned since from, the people and, the other thing, you're starting to think it really couldn't
Yeah.
be a plane. You said that day. And I said, boy, because I
Not
never
that
bent
we
your
know. It
arm.
could be a plane that we know of. And what I say, there
Yeah.
ain't nothing yet to this day that can fly that slow that we know of. It was going no faster than we was, 40 or 50 mile an hour.
Yeah, but I can't remember the date of that. It was many years later, but I remember laughing and grabbing you by the arm and saying, "I never thought I'd live to hear the day that you changed your mind, but you did." And it, it, not that it
Oh,
felt good about that, but there's a lot of people for how long you said it, and I never bent your arm or tried to change anybody's
oh,
mind about it. But you, you somehow eventually did end in that position. I think, and the reason I want to point that out is I think a lot of people sometimes look at us if they're unfamiliar or they came to the story recently or later, and they look at me and they go, "Oh God, you don't know who that is? That's Styles. He's always trying to promote or push this thing." And they go, "Oh, the guy in the village. Well, of course, he wants you to believe it's a UFO or real." But that's not really true about you, and it's not fair to hang that on you. And it was a
oh, we
long
always
time.
eat. And it's so
Yeah,
possible it was. Who knows what it was?
well, that's right. But I mean, I think sometimes, you get tarred with that brush unfairly. And it's probably a little more fair in my case, but really, like, I've just always tried to get to the facts of this thing. Um, would I want it to be true? Well, yeah, sure, but not to the point of trying to delude myself or to put it in someone else's mind. But in the meanwhile, it remains a mystery, and it remains so with me. But you know, I don't like seeing you hung with that label, and you haven't earned it. But yes, you did come to an open mind. Anybody that wants to know more about this, that's all very dramatic. Like say, Laurie was the first to pick up that phone and report this. And what he reported was that lights had gone on the water, possibly a plane crash.
Oh,
Concerns like
I heard
everybody
everybody
else.
was back then at the time was a plane crash. Everybody
That's
reported a plane crash.
that's right. And you know something, even in the field of UFO research back then, you know, Roswell had been a forgotten thing. That was in the news for a few days in 1947, and it was forgotten. And in the 1960s, if you'd read any UFO book, particularly the big ones like the UFO Experience by Hynek and so many others that were out, there was typically no stories of these kind of crash scenarios or something coming down to the earth. And when there, the consensus was in the field, if you'd asked one of the so-called experts at the time, and listen, look, the truth is there aren't any experts in this field. There
Truth
still
is,
isn't.
I still ain't read every book.
There's
Nobody,
there's
none
no
of them know.
well, and that bodes well for you. You're what we call an uncontaminated witness, right? You haven't had somebody's ideas
I
forced
ain't read
into you.
nobody's books. I know my story, and I don't want to be influenced by you get talking, say something I heard you. Well, I've heard you say
Well,
stuff.
I
I don't
think
mean
you'd
that
be the,
way, but
no, I think you'd be the wise one for it. Um, and that makes your opinion, your observations, I think, all the more pure, all the more valuable and genuine. But that aside, like I say, the consensus back in the 60s, if you'd read those books then, Laurie, was that these things don't crash. These things are so superior, etc. Right? Nowadays, in the field, we had some people think that why is there so many crashes? Some people even have the opinion that maybe they're meant to, etc., etc. Anyway, all of this is just speculation. Like I say, there aren't any so-called experts. You know what an expert is? He's a guy from a city that you don't live in that wears a suit. That's how I look at it. And there's a lot of them around. Anyway, anybody that wants to know more about the Shag Harbour incident, you could, of course, purchase or look online and get one of my books or other people that have researched the case. If you don't want to spend the money or aren't that interested, you could look online and probably find a copy of the Shag Harbour incident or many other documentaries that have been done since. One of the particularly more accurate ones was probably um, what was the one done by the U.S. History Channel there? It was called UFO Files Canada's Roswell. It's pretty accurate. There's been some new things learned since, but everything's there is pretty much intact. Even Irvin Banks' story was part of that one. You can go online because, oh, yes, there's Dark Object. That's the first little skinny American book that was edited to death by 3 different editors because the publisher, Del Bantam in New York, had some fear of being sued. And I tried to appease them and said, hey, look, it's Canada. Nobody's going to sue. It isn't worth it here. And then, of course, there's the Canadian book I did that I co authored with Graham Sims, which is Impact to Contact, still available on Amazon.com. And it has a lot more detail and things that we just didn't have access to, such as Ralph Lowenger's story about the near collision at 33,000 feet of his cargo flight jet that night. He was a career Pan Am pilot. He's been a guest on this show. If you want to know more about that, you can always come on and maybe subscribe and view one of the other episodes of the show. But so I would suggest anybody that wants to know more to do that. You can find all this online. You can find more about the case in depth. But now Laurie and I, we're here. We got other purposes today. We're going to jump ahead a few years, but he goes back. Now here's the part where some people will think, "What are the chances of that?" It would sound scripted. When I interview a case and it's major, or it has depth and multiple witnesses and stands the test of time as Shag Harbour has, but even many incidents that you haven't heard of, I often ask witnesses this. I say, so would you want to see one again? Do you think that you'll be that lucky to have a sighting? Not just the light in the distance you're not sure of, but where you've seen a UFO. And some people say, oh, I wouldn't want to. And others will answer, well, I don't think I'd be that lucky. You get this full range. Most people are in the, I don't think I'll be that lucky. And you know what? If you'd asked me, because the same night as the Shag Harbour incident, I saw something in Dartmouth. It's not even worth going into. If you find those documentaries, you'll see that story. We're not going to hash or go into all the detail. If you have an interest, by all means, look them up. Look up the book, look up another doc. Here's the thing. if you'd asked me, do you think I'd be that lucky? I think, oh God, no, but I sure hope I will be. And lightning did strike twice in this case. And here's the stranger part that's hard to believe. The next time it struck, I ended up there and being a witness, at least in my case, for the last 7 minutes of the event. Laurie was there. Think about this. I'm the guy who first investigated the Shag Harbour incident after the day. Laurie, the first witness to report the original Shag Harbour incident back in October 67. Justin Brown, who's often a co host on the show, who was the first one to observe this incident playing out down in Cape Sable Island and who managed to shoot some pretty respectable video of it at some point. And Heather Doucette, who also has an episode on this show. We were all, I was actually in Yarmouth, but we came together in time to stand the four of us together all those years later, and it was September the 15th, 2018, to watch a UFO. Now, with all that set up, I'm going to jump back to Laurie because, here's the thing. The first call I got was from Justin Brown, our typical co host who's off today at a birthday party. I hope he survives. And then he called me. I was in Yarmouth looking into another UFO case and said, "Where are you? You got to get here right away. There's a UFO over Cape Sable." So Heather and I said our goodbyes and we started making our way as quickly as possible in my car to Cape Sable. And on the way, I got a call from Laurie here, our guest today. And Laurie gets on the phone and says to me, "Chris, where are you? You know where I'm at right now? You know what I'm seeing?" Now, remember, this is the man who, for decades, did not call what he'd seen a world famous UFO crash scenario by some descriptions, did not call that a UFO, and it had only in recent years before that thinking, well, it's possible, had opened his mind to that. But when he calls me this day, Laurie tells me on the phone, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, you know what I'm seeing right now? There's a goddamn UFO over Cape Sable Island. So when Laurie said it to me, knowing how careful he was all these years and not jumping to that conclusion, I certainly sat up and paid attention. And look, I paid attention when Justin called me. When Laurie calls me, who was very careful about calling anything a UFO, whether it was that or sightings by other local residents. When he would tell me things, he would keep me updated. And I'd say, "What do you think, Laurie?" He goes, "Well, the man definitely seen something, might have been this." He always very cautious in his layman's way. But you remember that? I believe that's your exact words. I could be wrong. You called him and said, "You know where I am right now? In case people think there's a goddamn UFO," he says, "over the island right now."
I don't know. I didn't know Justin had called you to tell you. Well, yeah, Justin, I was in Barrington. And Justin had seen it from 40 minutes ago before he called me and told me, so I went on to see what it was. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I happened to see it first by the fire department building there on the south side. You can see it playing this day. So I don't got no idea what it was. So.
Yeah. So
Something I got the video right there on that computer. I go watch anytime, and it
yeah,
was definitely
but
something. All I can say, so it was there.
yeah,
So I,
but from when Justin first seen it, and when I first got on scene, it wasn't visible at first. It sort of came back to the area from being out to sea
where Justin
offshore.
first seen it first was on one side of the island, so it moved from that side to the other side, so it
Yeah.
moved.
But when you look at that whole time frame, Lori, that's an hour and 20 minutes. And the
Yeah,
great thing about that is it was in the daytime. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. Remember, it was perfect
yeah,
visibility.
beautiful
The
day.
air
So.
was clear. You knew what you were looking at. I saw it through binoculars off and on because it appeared and disappeared while I was watching it for 7 minutes. And what I saw appeared very much as a sort of translucent sphere with a cube inside. It kind of looked, most people said, like the peace symbol, but when I looked in the binoculars, you could see it was like a cube and you were looking at it corner on, kind of like, which is why I built the little model. But anyway, the point of all that again is that this stuff continues in the area. It's going on there. Um, they sometimes, like I say, hang that label. Of course, Laurie wants this to be true and wants to promote it as a UFO. But when you called me that day, I'll tell you, it made me sit up and I thought I'd already received the call from Justin. And then when you called and said without hesitation, "I've seen a goddamn UFO over Cape Sable," I'm like, okay, if Laurie just dropped the guard and calls it that, I knew I wasn't going to come down and see a Sea King or you know what I
I
mean?
knew it wasn't the planes, all I can say,
No,
but
that's right. That's right. And
what
we
it was,
got
I
there
got no idea.
and it was exciting. But I remember we were standing there, and I can remember the other thing you said. Those words have stuck with me. Is we're on the beach and we're looking, and this thing when I was there, it disappeared twice and came back. And remember at one point, Justin ran back to my car and got my Steiner binoculars, and I'm getting a good look at it. And I looked at you, and you looked at all of us, and you said, "No one's going to believe this ain't scripted." You know that we were all here together, and had a UFO sighting. But such is life. So lightning did strike twice for us in
Yeah.
that sense.
I
But
didn't know Justin was up in the area, so yeah, didn't know none of you as far as I know.
no, and originally him and I were going to get together there, but the plans kind of fell through, and he wanted to get back a little earlier. And Heather and I spent longer than we did interviewing the physics teacher there in Yarmouth, and but it's just amazing that it came together at all. But there it is, and what are the chances of that? Well, obviously
One in
pretty
a
good.
million?
I go ahead.
I said 1 in a million, or probably more than that. Chances of that happening again.
Well, but there it is, and then we were to learn later, thanks to strangely enough, the person I was visiting in Yarmouth there to hear her story, Robin McKenzie, who is a retired physics teacher from Yarmouth High, she discovered online that exactly the same thing had been seen 50 weeks before over North Bay, Ontario. And pictures have been taken of it, and it was the same thing. And again, people made that association and said it looked like it had the peace symbol on the side.
I
But
see, and
again,
many people have had it posted at different places, even Nova Scotia saying it's the same thing. They've had the same type
that's
of
right.
picture.
And actually, what they're seeing was very similar to what a lot of those pilots saw in the Atlantic, not the Tic Tac sightings in the Pacific, but on the USS Theodore Roosevelt in 2014, the things they're seeing. Now, they pictured the cube with the sphere inside, kind of the reverse. But again, some people said it looked like the peace symbol, some of you know what I mean? And they were seeing this down 100 miles off the coast of Virginia when they were doing, F-16 exercises on the carriers there, So very interesting. It's a worldwide thing. But what was great about us being there that day is what are the chances the four of us were there and others seen it. Remember a few weeks later when we had the get together at the museum there, how many people showed up that had witnessed it, that wanted to see the
Yeah.
video Justin had shot. We had to do a second presentation. We must have had 60 people in that tiny building that day. It was quite something, because before that we'd had that conference that was poorly attended, and yeah, it was shocking. But obviously, many people had witnessed this thing, so that was pretty cool. So lightning can strike twice. I always tell Nova Scotians, we're a bad lot here. People walk around all the time looking at the ground. You must notice this, with their hands in their pocket. And I said, when you're outdoors around here, you got to take your hands out of your pocket. You got to look up and look at the world. I think a lot
Don't
of
look
things
there,
are
you
just,
gotta make sure you don't trip.
yeah, well, we're a bad
Whatever.
lot that way. But you know what I want to go to now is the future. And that's why we got you on here today, and I want people to know not just what's coming, um, not in Shag Harbour. Well, part of this will be in Shag Harbour, isn't it? But
What are we
Senator to
gonna do?
Yarmouth, our upcoming
I
UFO
can't tell,
Expo.
because on that Sunday we're gonna have the museum open. We're gonna play them tapes same as we always did.
Well, that's
So
that's what I mean.
everybody
Yeah,
ain't gonna want to go on the tour. There's nothing happening in
yeah,
Yarmouth. So Sunday, I've
yeah.
talked to Normie and Heather, and then they'll all be at all the witnesses that's still alive to
Okay.
anything. Or not all of them. Some of them will be at the museum on Sunday.
Okay, so we're going to explain for our audience what we're talking about here, like that. Some people out there, a few, will know of this, and um, the last few years, through this awful time of all this COVID problems and this terrible virus and all the terrible foolishness that's gone around with it too, with the government trying to save us all from the virus and ourselves and everything else, is that it's been very hard to have a public event. Big industries have suffered. In Halifax, we lost our cruise ships, which are just coming back this year. Lots of things have been shut down. We all know all kinds of businesses have suffered, but not just businesses, special events. Whether it's been a rock concert or a UFO symposium, as you found. And for the last few years, have been trying to pull off an event in Yarmouth where we had some of the great people in the field come here and bring them to Shag Harbour and put on a very unique event. And of course, COVID got in the way. We weren't sure people could get across the border. We didn't know if we could bring in the talent or the guests could get here, and we were forced to cancel. And we've been so lucky because everybody that we've had that is presenting or offering some kind of talent at this thing has hung in with us. And we're hoping that this is year to pull it off. And it does look much more possible now. Sean is flashing up one of the places on the website here, one of the pages where you can go to get information at Shag Harbour UFO XPO.com. But I want Laurie to say a few things about this, about how it come about, because he has hung in, and without his efforts and without the society, these things wouldn't be happening. There's an awful lot of work that goes into putting on one of these things. And how long ago was it? Was it 2, 3 years? And now we first had the meeting, figuring what kind of an event do we want to have. Do you remember
Yes,
that
well,
when we met?
it was after the 2017 and 20, well, the 2017 was the 50th anniversary, and then the
A very
2018,
successful. Yeah. 20.
2018 and 2019 we
Yeah.
had, and then we tried to do something bigger once Stanley Reed
Yeah.
got involved with us, and so
Yeah.
yeah, it was
I
supposed to be
remember.
2020 to start with, and it just got fall through. So
Yeah, I remember those meetings we had. I was in attendance at them there at the museum. And I can remember we were kind of putting together a wish list. And I can remember we started with wanting 10 big speakers, and we reduced that to 5 and thought, um, maybe we'll do that and we'll go on a bus tour the next day, because there had been an event years ago. In fact, it was put on by Michael McDonald, one of the producers of the show, that was quite successful. We did down there. And there was a lot of little sort of, let's call them subplots going on, where people were saying, well, I want to see some female presenters and I want to see this, and we kind of put together a wish list and tried to realistically bring together that we could. And very early on, we realized that if we were going to attract an international crowd successfully, and this had been done before, Laurie, you pulled this off in 2017 with the 50th anniversary, right? We had a lot of US people come up.
yeah,
And years ago, Mike McDonald had that conference in Dartmouth where we drove down and did the tour, to Shag Harbour the next day. And we only had one busload go down, but we had over 200 people in Dartmouth. We filled that auditorium, became part of a documentary, the people there and speaking to the speakers. And I can't remember what year it was. I think it was 2000 or 1999, something like that. But that was quite successful. And to do that, it's a lot of work, like you say. And you know, we're trying to do all these things. And the hard part to realize for you and the society, of course, was we really couldn't do it all in Shag Harbour, could we? Because there
we've
just
got no
isn't the
hotel in the
facility.
area. The problem is there ain't
That's
no
right.
hotel in the area.
That's right. So, we sat at the
We
meeting, we
pulled it
looked
off
at
in
it.
20. We pulled it off for the 50th anniversary. We were just lucky, but we had a hall that was big enough that held 100, 200 people.
That's right. But the,
But
but the other
everybody was
thing
staying in
was it
every
was
bed and
summer.
breakfast, every hotel, everything here was full, and there was
That's right.
probably more people. There was just nowhere to stay.
In fact, what I remember, and it was cute, I wish I'd kept pictures from it. It was like a tent city, wasn't it, out back of the,
People tended to find that. Some people tended
yeah.
right by the museum. There was 4 tents
But
there, I think.
yeah, but see, that was viable because we held that in the summer. Remember, it wasn't
October
October.
the 4th.
Oh, was it? I didn't think it
Yep,
was that
that was
late.
on the weekend.
I guess I'm mistaken. I thought that
The
okay.
next
I
year we
stand
went back to
corrected.
August to have it, and we had it at the arena when the Custos was there.
That okay. You're right, of course. You got that right. But anyway, we thought if we're going to attract an even larger crowd of Americans to come up here and people internationally and across Canada, that you need a proper hotel. So the nearest community we looked to was Yarmouth, right? And we settled on that and
We
struck a
looked at
deal.
Liverpool first, and then they bumped us for 2020.
Oh, that's right. Well, there you go. It seems like a million years ago. There's just one of the many sort of.
Supposed to be in Liverpool to start with, and then they come out and said they already had the
That's right. That's
hotel
right.
book, which we know is false, but that's beside the point.
Well,
So then we
it
contacted Yarmouth,
yeah.
and we was going to have it in the, you know what, to start with, community college, because that for
Yes.
the first year, the Grand already had the room booked.
Yeah. Well, this is why I
So
wanted
by
to have
getting
this.
up for 2020, we was able to get the conference room in the same one we got this year.
Yeah. And like I say, I people should realize out there how difficult in normal times these things are to put on. But you go through this stuff with COVID and all the problems and losing bookings in hotels, et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of footwork. It's a lot of runaround. And, everything's ambiguous. And like I say, we've been very lucky that the way we'd originally planned the event, that everything we planned to have in the beginning is still intact. All of our listed speakers have stuck beside us and want to come here to do this. All the other events that are going on. In fact, now there's still a list of things growing up that are growing that are going to be attached to it that I would call bonus features that should play out to make this a unique event. And I know it sounds like just a pitch or a line, but I don't know of any other conference, not even in Roswell, can you go to, because in Roswell you have a couple other incidents. There are several locations that say, no, this is where it happened. This is where it happened. But we know where everything happened in Shag Harbour. And where else can you go that you can go somewhere? You can hear the so-called experts on it. You can meet the original witnesses like yourself, where we're going to put you on a bus. We can't take you through time, but we're going to take you right there to the locations. And there's no controversy as to where all these things happened, you know? And,
I'm going on the bus from Yarmouth to Shag Harbour. Then Justin's going, then you're the rest of the way. As
so
everybody's going.
yeah, unless you can go back in time with a time machine, it's as close as you're going to get to these events. And if you're interested in this phenomenon, if you're interested in that, this conference in Yarmouth, COVID and God willing, we have this thing this time and we're all determined to do it. And it's looking better. We had a change of government here again, like all governments here. Nobody likes it. But I'll tell you one thing, they seem to like to leave things open here because, God, they don't have any choice anymore, do they, Laura? I mean, we got to
Oh,
start opening things up. And I think they know that much. And that's a good thing. And it's going to play in our favor. If we don't have this now, it ain't going to happen. But everybody's determined to have it. We've been getting ticket sales. We're getting
that's
other
probably
events.
my last year being involved in it, and I think that's the same with you, isn't it? Your
Me,
next year.
well, yeah, I'm going to be involved as a researcher. I'm going to be involved with this podcast, but I'm not going to try to assemble conferences or things. Somebody might be able to lure me to speak at one now and then, I'm sure, but not part of the organization. There's a great list of speakers, you know, eminent people in the field: David Marler, Nick Pope. God, he's on every TV show. Debbie Ziegelmeyer. I was talking with Debbie the other day. She has unfortunately, she had a little injury where she has a
No, you were telling me,
separated, what do they call it, rotator cuff, and she had to have surgery. But she says, I'll be 100% by then. And she intends to even go diving. That's one of the things. She's a commercial diver. And along with being a state section director for the Mutual UFO Network. And you know what? What I didn't think of at the time, you got to tell the girls, Rob Switek, one of the other speakers who also was on this show, is also a diver. So he might
okay.
want to go too. Um, I don't know if any of the other speakers are, but there's two of the five. And I know
Yeah.
down there they joked
Oh,
about
wait.
me. Which one was it when we did the little thing in the museum was saying to me, I'd love to see Chris dive. And she said, I'd pay to see that. And I think my response was, I don't think she had that kind of money, but you know.
I don't know who
Um,
it was.
but anyway, yeah, we should let her know that Rob Switek is another one.
I will let
Rob
you
is a
know
diver.
get off here. But yeah, I was
Sure.
going to ask Debbie to start with if she wanted to go diving because I knew she was a diver. Because you
Yeah.
told me. And then the girls was searching it. They see her name. They knew she was a. She's got a diver instructor license and all that. And they wanted to. So if
Yeah.
they could arrange everything for her. She ain't gonna bring no equipment. They got it all. So.
Yeah. Again, these are some of the other bonus things that are going to happen around the conference. They might
And
happen
some
the
of them
day
are going to the
before
conference. They're going to be
or
here
after.
diving. Going. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's all very exciting. And I think there's going to be other events like that. To pick another example, just this morning I sent a detailed email to Ralph Lowinger, right?
okay.
And there's still a good chance that Ralph might attend. Now, Ralph has been a guest on the show, and for anybody who doesn't know, back on the night of October 3rd, the night before the famous Shag Harbour incident, Ralph was in a cargo flight on a Pan Am flight flying over the Gulf of Maine towards the Shag Harbour area when they had a near collision with another mysterious set of lights and object. In fact, the flight engineer on the flight, Michael Littlepage, believes that he actually looked into the lights and realized that they were internal lighting and windows, and he thought he could see inside of it. But whatever it was, they did have a near collision scenario, and it's a matter of record, and they were in touch. We believe that Ralph might be coming up. He'd been up in the past, and it's a chance, like I say, not just to meet somebody but Laurie, but an airline pilot in a near collision the night of the incident. It's going to be a unique opportunity. We got to pull it off this year, and I think we will. And you know, cornball
He's
as it
got a
is, I got
daughter
to.
named Laurie, and I was talking to her the other day, and she said their intentions is to come if the house flats them. They're all coming again. So.
I hope so. Look, we had a great time. I can remember when I was down there with my cousin. The days when they came to Halifax, we went out with them several times. My cousin and I, right downtown to eat and go out with him and the girls, right. And we just had a great time. He did an episode for us a few weeks ago. It's now up on YouTube. You can see it. Ralph's episode.
Yeah.
And like I say, I really do hope that him and Sharon and the girls come back again and people can meet him, and it's going to be a unique opportunity. Like I say, the speakers, the experts, the people were there, one of the pilots. It doesn't get any better than that. We're going to take you to the sites. I mean, you're not going to get that much bang for the buck at any other conference. There's a lot of great conferences out there, and I'm not going to say this is better, but it's certainly going to be unique.
Yeah, unique. Well, there's
Yeah.
only one change from if we were going to have it 2020. Remember, we were going to do something Friday night.
Oh,
Because
that's because we don't have the Friday. Yeah.
that's going to happen Saturday night.
Yeah. Well,
Everything's good. That's the only
it'll
thing that's
still.
changed. We're not doing nothing on Friday night. So.
Yeah, but yeah, that's it. And like I say, anybody that wants to know more, you just go to the website, Shag Harbour UFO XPO.com, and that'll be it. Um, some of it could be described as quaint, not a word I usually apply to it. Sort of cute but entertaining. One of the things the last few times we did these things on just a local level, that myself, one part of me shakes my head, but at the same time, I cannot deny the enjoyment they had is the trivia contest that we've had.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah. That went over great with everybody.
I'm going to have, yeah. And what is it?
That
What's
write
the
some new
prize?
questions.
What's the prize going to be this year?
We'll have to figure that out. We have a meeting.
Okay. Oh, I thought it was going to be one of the coins or whatever. Is that for something else? That's just for attending, is it?
Well, we're selling tickets on it, but if you attend, you're going to get some free tickets on it, and it's going to be drawn for at the probably Saturday night.
Now, the coin I'm referring to is one of the ones the Canadian Mint released in a limited release a few years ago. They only minted 4,000 of them. It's a silver coin. It has a $20 face value, and it commemorates the Shag Harbour incident. And, they sold out. So unless you find one online from a private seller or whatever, you're not going to get one anymore. But some lucky attendee at this event that buys a ticket may walk home with that.
Or it could be
So,
something in the general population who is selling tickets on it, but if you attend, you're going to get your name in there free, and you can buy more tickets.
yeah, so somebody could get lucky, that's for sure, sort of thing. So, what else should we cover, Dick? What else that I haven't touched on at the conference is going to happen?
That's about it that I can think of. Probably the minute second something will come to my mind, but
Well, are they going to have the night watch thing this time, or is that just too much of a distraction?
what night could we have it?
Well, I don't know. It sounds like this is why we're having a meeting.
If you wanted to do that, you'd have to try to do it on a Friday night.
Yeah, yeah, that may not be possible, but then we'll see what's going on.
I'm going to try to have the Coast Guard again there Sunday morning.
Yeah, yeah, if we can
Either
time that,
there,
coordinate that with the bus.
either have it there or south side, one or the other.
Anyway, both of
And
those
hopefully the
days.
parachute, the divers that jump with chutes, hopefully they're going to be there. That's all in the works. Can't say they will be, or can't say they won't be, but
Yeah.
that'll
But
depend on the
certainly,
weather too.
from morning to night, those are going to be 2 tightly packed days. There's going to be something to do right through pretty much all the time there, really. And you
Yeah,
got to remember
Saturday's going.
how we should tell them the different sites we're going to on the bus tour on day 2. Like I say, day 1 is all the presentations of the speakers at the symposium. But day number 2, when we're going on the tour,
Saturday night
where are
is your
we
trivia
going?
night. Saturday night's your trivia night
Okay.
at the
I but okay, let's jump ahead to the Sunday. Like we know that all the presenters, all of us are going to talk on the Saturday, right? All the
yeah.
US spirit and whatever. But on the Sunday, people are getting on a bus or 2 or 3 or however many buses it's going to take, and we're taking you to the locations. And what are the locations? What's the first one we're going to?
The
Would
first
be
one, you come in from Yarmouth, the first one will be Shag Harbour. Spend the time there and see where everything happened.
back in 67, and you're going to be on site explaining that and pointing
I'll be
everything
on
out,
the
of
bus
course.
from Yarmouth, probably with the people
All
to
right.
Shag Harbour.
Yeah. Dick will
Tell all the
talk and
story there. When it leaves Shag Harbour, Justin Brown should be on the bus because you're going to his sites next.
yeah. Well,
So,
Dick will be doing most of the talking. I'll probably explain just briefly afterwards what was going on in Ottawa while that was happening the next day or two. And then we're going back on the bus and we go on to Cape Sable Island where Justin filmed his video of this.
that's
If you
going to
get
be Justin's story. I'm not even going to be there to that unless I have to be. That's Justin
okay.
Jones hasn't said she'd be there, so there's
Yeah.
really nothing I can add to it other than I was there.
Yeah.
Any more
Well,
you want to add to the side?
Justin's going to be there, and I suppose I'll be adding in just what we found out the days later about Mattawa, Ontario, um, about how it ties in with a certain type of sighting and the NORAD radar records that are missing and all these things. I can set up what's going on elsewhere, sort of thing. But it's a beautiful site. It's somewhere to go, and I imagine we'll probably break for lunch. Then would we? Is at the 2? Is that
After we leave there, when we go from Southside, we're supposed to be going to Anchors Away for lunch.
anchors away? Okay, and on the
Then
way
what
in
we
from
gotta, and what we gotta remember is depends on how many people we got in that bus. If we got 2 buses, there ain't no way everybody's going to get into Anchors Away. So one bus may have to. We got to figure out how many there is, and we'll go from there. But one bus might have to stop in Barrington to let's say where's that place you usually go.
it. That could be. We'll have to see as this thing folds up, right? I mean,
Right.
sometimes at these events, because I've been at a few and I helped organize that one with Michael. Sometimes not everybody takes the tour, but they'll take the conference, right? So we'll figure. But you got the
Yeah.
2 other locations. You got the NORAD base. You got the former secret base that was the listening post for
There's your
submarines.
story. That's after lunch.
You're going to get your money's worth, folks, if you could make it here. And it might be the last chance to go in when all this stuff comes together, where you can still see the witnesses that are still with us that have survived this. It's going to be good. It'll be like no other. Something to tell the grandkids about, I would say, whatever, take pictures. Bring it up memory.
I got one of them coins handy if you want me to grab it. Half a minute, I'll be back with it.
Well, the music's playing, so if you're really quick as we go to our close. Maybe we'll get to hear some of the final nuances of Michael's composition there. We've had some of our guests write in to ask about the music. And again, that's a local product from our producer. He's got that kind of talent. And here we are, Dick. Our parting shot will be the coin.
On the right one. 2020, that's why I'm built. That ain't it. That's what I mean.
Hold it up. There you go. It's colorful, glows in the dark.
Different than put the backlight on it.
Nice piece of artwork.
I'll show you the back of it.
Yeah, if you could move over just a little bit there. That's it. Now you got it. We can see it all. $20 coin, silver coin. It's a collector's item. The mint gets sold out. Just one more reason to be there. I want to thank you, Laurie, for being the guest today. And I know it wasn't easy to get the connection from Shag Harbour.
No problem.
And,
Once we got there.
You're here, and this will be up on YouTube in a few weeks. And can't wait to meet you at the meeting. Always like coming down the shore and at the conference, and we're going to make it work. All right.
Thanks, man.
All right. God bless you. Have a great day.
Same here.
down there.
About an hour.
Okay.